As is tradition, we begin the show on Tuesdays now with Judge Andrew Napolitano. Judge, how are you?
I'm fine, Joey. Thank you again for your kind and generous introduction. And how are you?
I'm doing quite well. And real quick question. I know anytime somebody says I'm writing a book, it can go whatever way and take a long time. But are you still working on that weighty tome about natural law?
Oh no, that weighty tome came out in February, and I meant to send you a copy, and I will.
Okay, because the Catholic schoolboy in me, along with the political theorist in me, I really want to read this.
Okay.
So
I will ask you off air for a mailing address, and you'll get a copy with my personalized inscription.
Oh, fantastic! Thank you,
Joey.
That,
it's a doorstop. It's 500 pages, and there are 2,000 footnotes. The footnotes are the universe of everything written in the English language on natural law.
Well, that's going to be one of those long-term irons in the fire, I think, then. I'm also still working my way through discourses on Livy, so it's just going to I'll add it to the list, but I look forward to that. Thank you, Judge.
Of course.
Now, let's begin with this op-ed you penned last week, talking about how we're, again, trading liberty for safety. And we're seeing this often. It's usually put in the context of war, but we also saw this during COVID and in so many other ways. What's going on here?
Well, what prompted me to write this, and it drew me to Benjamin Franklin's famous one-liner, those who would give up essential liberty in order to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. If I could have amended that with deference and respect to the great founding father, it would be not deserve neither, but will end up with neither. Because when you give the government liberty, the government presents a satanic bargain, like a devil coming out from behind a tree. Hey, give me your freedom and I'll keep you safe. You end up with neither. Nothing keeps you safe, because what's going to keep you safe from the entity to which you surrendered your freedom? Nothing. But the concept of surrendering freedom in order to be safe is just the age-old bargain that governments in popular democracies give us. I mean, George W. Bush took freedoms away from us and the Congress after 9/11. None of those freedoms came back. The warrantless spying, one FBI agent authorizing another FBI agent to spy, all the exposures by Julian Assange and Edward Snowden, all that stuff shows that the government is still invading our privacy without suspicion, without warrant, without the law, without the Constitution. Okay, what prompted me to write this? A piece in Forbes Media last week, now 2 weeks ago, which revealed that the government has been browbeating TikTok, of all people, asking it to surrender its property, its intellectual property, its algorithms, and its operating systems. What? Why would TikTok do that? Well, the government is threatening to shut TikTok down on the grounds of, you guessed it, the government's favorite excuse, safety, with air quotes around safety. The government wants to keep the American public safe from TikTok spying. Give me a break. You post something on TikTok, you have no privacy right in what you posted. If that TikTok somehow uses what you posted to get inside your own device, that's called computer hacking. It's a felony. They can be prosecuted and you can sue them. But when the government spies on you without suspicion, without probable cause, without a subpoena, without a search warrant, there's next to nothing you can do about it. Try suing and see what that lawsuit gets you. So for the government to keep you, say, we want to keep you safe from TikTok spying, is a joke. Who's going to keep us safe from the government spying? Answer, only a Constitution, which doesn't work anymore. Only members of Congress who have the fortitude to uphold their oath to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution, and fewer than a dozen in each house have that courage.
Well, and I think the last time this came up on my radar, Rand Paul was one of the few. We have a few, like 5 of them, if that, up there in the Congress and the House and the Senate. But we need more people to stand up, because you just said something huge there. I've been putting it in pretty crass terms. My boss told me I need to stop doing this, but I said a long time ago they killed the Constitution, and they've been wearing it like a skin suit for a long time.
Right. The Constitution came into existence for two reasons: to constitute, to establish the federal government, and to restrain the federal government. According to Jefferson, to chain it down to the four corners of the Constitution. It has succeeded beyond the framers' wildest imaginings in establishing the federal government, because that government now governs everything. It has failed absolutely miserably, totally, and without exception to chain the government down. The government has found ingenious, deceptive, and in some cases unlawful ways to exceed the confines that the Constitution attempted to impose on it. And this right to privacy is just one of them.
Again, folks, we're talking to Judge Andrew Napolitano. You can always go to judgenap.com or check out Judging Freedom, his podcast I tend to watch on YouTube, but available wherever podcasts are available. And now another area where Americans, way too many Americans, millions of them, traded their liberty for so-called safety or security is with COVID. And you're now seeing attempts by certain outlets, certain people, to bring back the fear that was set in there in early 2020. Just especially from your part of the world there in the Northeast, are you genuinely worried they're going to bring back these restrictions, from lockdowns to masking to all the other aspects of that lockdown regime?
I would think it'll produce a civil war or revolution if they try and do it again. I think there's just too many members of the public who are so skeptical of the government, no matter what it says, whether it's talking about science or the weather or climate change or the Constitution. People don't believe the government anymore. That will also depend largely on who's in the White House. If it's Joe Biden again, well, then these crazy left-wing governors will find support in the White House, although they found support under Donald Trump as well. One of Trump's greatest, almost unforgivable failures, and I say this as his longtime friend who likes him a lot, was his backing up of the left-wing governors and mayors who locked the country down. I don't think that can happen again, because, again, a person I'm not fond of. In fact, I think he was a murderous thug, Abraham Lincoln. But he did say some wonderful things, like, with public sentiment, nothing can fail, and without it, nothing can succeed. Public sentiment supported the lockdowns last time. I don't think public sentiment will support the lockdowns this time. I mean, the Soviet Union collapsed when the military and the intelligence community and the police said, enough is enough. The same thing will happen here. Police have spouses and children, and they just don't want to put up with this any more than the rest of us do. And when the police thumb their noses at governors or at a president who may say this, there'll be no way to enforce it.
Well, and just a quick follow-up came to my mind, thinking about the Soviet Union and when they started telling the truth there. Do you think if, like, Americans, not just like Vivek Ramaswamy saying, I tell the truth on the campaign trail, I think I like the guy, but he's running for office, so there's going to be always a little falsity, I think. But if Americans, especially at the highest level, really started telling the truth about their government, do you think this government would stand?
No. If the American public knew the truth about the federal government, that it captures every single keystroke on your mobile device or your desktop, that it spends 3 or 4 trillion more a year than it takes in taxes, that it benefits from perpetual war, that its principal goal is just to stay in office, that it has no respect for the natural rights of individuals, that it couldn't care less about the Bill of Rights or the Constitution. I could go on and on and on and on. The American public will see the monstrosity that it has become, and I don't think they'll tolerate it. And places like Vermont and Texas, which retained the right to secede from the Union, will do so. They will simply say to the feds, get the hell out.
Right. And it doesn't have to be. The specter of civil war, especially in this country's history, is always raised, as you were just talking about Lincoln. But people should look to the example of the late 80s, and as the Soviet Union fell apart, thank God there wasn't mass bloodshed.
Well, the other reason the Soviet Union fell apart is because it was bankrupt. Now, the federal government is absolutely bankrupt, even if you take into account all of the land it stole that it still now owns. That is vastly outweighed by the trillions and trillions and trillions in debt that it has. It only shows about 35 trillion in debt on the books. But if you include its financial obligations to the American public, that balloons up to more than 100 trillion in debt. That far outweighs what the federal government owns. So you, dear Joey, are richer than the federal government. As is just about everybody listening to us and watching us now.
Oh, my goodness. And final question, just kind of your sense of things, because I know you've had this gentleman on, Alistair Crook, as a guest on Judging Freedom. He's a great piece in LouRockwell.com today. Hotel Ukraine. Sure, check out anytime, but you can never leave. He's essentially starting to see the end game and the hedging by the establishment here in D.C., but, I mean, you've talked to Alistair, you've talked to many of your experts on Ukraine. Is there, say, daylight between, say, some of the folks in the intelligence community and the Pentagon right now, competing points of view on what should be done there? And are we entering a sort of an end game here?
So Alistair and I discussed this piece that Lou published this morning, last week. And Alistair's argument is that there is some daylight between the Victorian Newlands of the world who want to use Ukraine as a battering ram against Russia, and soon will want to use Taiwan or South Korea as a battering ram against China. Because there are more and there are growing numbers in the intelligence community who are saying you can't keep feeding Biden the nonsense you think he wants to hear. We see what's going on the ground. It is impossible for Ukraine to win. They are not going to win on the battlefield. They are not going to pierce the three rings of defenses that the Russian military, actually the Russian military didn't build it, Russia's best construction companies, totally unmolested by the Ukraine military, built these three cement rings of defense. And the Ukraine military hasn't even come close to piercing the first one, even though the Wall Street Journal had a headline on Saturday saying Ukraine pierces Russia's first line of defense. If you read the story, they had one source, a Ukrainian soldier, and it wasn't verified by anybody, and nobody else picked up the piece. Wall Street Journal? Yeah, the Wall Street Journal is part of the mainstream media that is mouthing the CIA nonsense. Well, there are CIA agents who are beginning to say to their bosses, enough is enough.
Good, because I've discovered how you can find other open sources. I listened to all your interviews on Ukraine, but at the best, the Ukrainians look like they've pierced a little bit of that first line around Robotina, but it's more like probing, and it seems like they're being funneled right where the Russians want that first line, so to speak, to break, if necessary. So I'm glad that there are smart people. I want to believe there's still smart people within positions of power and authority in this government that, at least practically speaking, will say, okay, we're done, guys. This has been a stupid policy from the beginning.
Well, they have the power to amass the evidence. They don't have the authority because it goes through their bosses, and their bosses became their bosses by playing nice with whoever is in the White House. So you don't have Ray McGovern or Phil Giraldi telling Ronald Reagan or George W. Bush what's going on and telling the truth. You have, I don't know who they are, nameless individuals. Maybe it's Director Burns himself telling Joe Biden exactly what he and Victoria Nuland and Jake Sullivan want to hear, which is keep up the battle. Now, Joe has an interest in keeping up the battle because he has no off-ramp. He needs to show some sort of a palpable claim to victory between now and November of 2024 if he's going to run for re-election. I mean, my piece last week is about them stealing stuff from TikTok. Why? Because something else he has to show is tenacity with the Chinese.
Right.
The Chinese are going to be demonized in the next election. Whoever the Republican is will hate the Chinese, and whoever the Democrat is will hate the Chinese. Drop the tariffs and trade with the Chinese, and we'll become a wealthier country. Not going to happen.
Well, Judge, I always appreciate your time. If folks want to check out Judging Freedom and what's coming up, how can they do so?
So Larry Johnson was supposed to be on right now, and I said, Larry, we made a mistake. We thought today was Monday. It seemed like yesterday was Sunday. I have Joey Clark every every Tuesday at 1 o'clock Eastern. He said, "You're moving me to 1:30?" He said, "Yes." He said, "I'm watching Joey Clark at 1 o'clock today."
Wow. Well,
At
thank
2
you for
o'clock
that.
today, this is Eastern time, the great Colonel Doug McGregor. What's going on between Russia and North Korea? And how did that take the U.S. State Department totally by surprise?
Again, folks,
2 o'clock today.
Judging Freedom, 2 o'clock today. It's must watch, must listen stuff. I appreciate it, Judge, as always. Until next week.
You got it, Joey. Thank you, my man. All the best.